Welcome to my channel, guys. Make sure you support by liking as well as subscribing to my channel if you haven't subscribed. So in this video we're going to talk about the limbic system. So I'm going to break it down into its simplest form so that by the end of this video at least you could have gotten something. Alright guys, let's try to make sense. Okay, so our objective, we'll look at the definition and anatomic position of the limbic system. We'll look at the function of the limbic system. We'll talk about the components of the limbic system. We'll talk about the connections of the limbic system, and we'll wrap up everything by adding clinical correlation at the end. Okay, so without wasting much of our time, let's get started. So the word limbus means a ring. Okay, so by definition, limbic system is a ring-like structure of cortical and subcortical component situated superiorlaterally to the diencephalon and inferiormedially to the two cerebral hemisphere. Okay, so now let's move to the function of the limbic system. So I'll talk about three main functions of the limbic system. Okay, so the first function I'll talk about is that the limbic system, it is involved into the emotion aspect of behavior. In particular, we'll talk about the fear and anger, okay, as well as sexual behavior. And then it is also involved, the next function is that it is also involved into the recent memory, okay. Then the third function is that the limbic system is also involved into the integration of olfactory. Okay, so now let's talk about the component of the limbic system. Okay, so when talking about the component of the limbic system, they are divided into two. We have the component which are part of the cerebral cortex, they are called cortical component, and those parts which are not part of the cerebral cortex, they are called subcortical components. So the subcortical component, basically they are part of the diencephalon. Okay, so diencephalon, we know that it is made of four components also. So we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, as well as the subthalamus, and we have also epithalamus. So epithalamus is also divided into three parts, of which we know that we have the pineal gland, the posterior commissure, as well as the habenula. Okay, so now let's come back here and talk about the components. Okay, so just to give you an orientation, the limbic system can be thought of a system of gray matter and white matter. So when we talk about the gray matter, we are basically talking about the nuclei. Okay, so if this is our neuron, okay, so this is the axon of the neuron, right? So the axon is myelinated. So once we myelinate the axon, what we form, it is the white matter. And then the part which is not myelinated, it is the gray matter. Okay, so the gray matter, we are basically talking about the neuron and then the nuclei. And then when you talk about white matter, we're talking about the connections. Okay, so the limbic system is a system of the gray matter and white matter because it consists of the nuclei which are connected by fibers which are white matter. Okay, so now excuse, so this is the part which we are going to do a much which we are going to look at. Okay, we'll start with the cortical component. So the cortical component, we have two main components. So we start with the limbic lobe. Okay, so the limbic lobe, so inlet here, it is a limbic lobe. So this makes sense now since we said limbic system is a ring-like structure. Okay, so this is a ring-like structure. So parts of the limbic lobe, so there are four main parts of the limbic lobe. So let's start with the cingulate gyrus here. So the cingulate gyrus, it is involved into the satisfaction center. So after the meal or after having intercourse, this is the part which plays a role. It works in hand with the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus, which is also involved into the satiety center. Okay, and then this side here we can see another part of the limbic lobe which is called isthmus. And then as we continue inferiorly, we have another part which is called parahippocampal gyrus. So parahippocampal gyrus also called the entorhinal Brodmann area number 28. So this is the secondary center for olfactory nerve. Okay, so just anterior to entorhinal we have another part which is called anchors. Okay, so remember course and distribution of olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1. Once it originates from the mucosa epithelium of the nose, it moves in between the cribriform plate, okay, and then just anterior to the cribriform plate, it synapses with the mitral and shaft cells, and then it continues within the olfactory bulb. From the olfactory bulb, it continues within the olfactory tract, and then it finds its way to its primary center, which is located between the anchors and perforated substance somewhere here, and then the information reached the parahippocampal gyrus, which is the secondary center of olfactory. So it now makes sense when we say entorhinal cortex, it is responsible for sense of smell because it's part of it receives some fibers from the olfactory nerve. Okay, so now moving on to the next item which we are going to talk about, it is the hippocampal formation. So the hippocampal formation, it is this part which is in black. Okay, so this is the part which is called the hippocampal formation. So superior to the corpus callosum, we have the indusium griseum. So the indusium griseum, it forms medial and lateral longitudinal bundle, and then we follow it just the inferior laterally here. We have another part here which is called gyrus fasciolaris. So gyrus fasciolaris is another part, and then this part which present with zebra lines, it is called the dentate gyrus. Okay, and then this part which is in black, okay, this look like a bulb, it is called hippocampus. So hippocampus, it is continuously medially with the subiculum. So subiculum is another part of the hippocampal formation. Okay, so this hippocampus, it is responsible for recent memory. Okay, so now let's talk about the subcortical component of gray matter. So subcortical component of gray matter, we are basically talking about this component. So let's start here. So here we have the amygdala body, which is basically the amygdala, right? And then we have the mammillary body, we have the anterior nucleus of thalamus, we have the septal area, and we have the olfactory area here. Remember, we have our olfactory bulb coming from this side, so this is our olfactory area. Okay, so this part, they are connected to each other by tracks, or rather the fibers. So we'll talk about them. So if we were to talk about the function of the amygdala, so this part plays a major role in smell mediated sexual behavior. So if there is an atrophy to this part, it means someone will lose sense of or interest in sex. Okay, so that's the reason why you notice that people in late 60s, they tend to lose interest in sex. Okay, so because this part by then could have atrophied. Okay, it is also the part which plays a role in emotion aspect. Okay, it also receives some fibers from the olfactory nerve, so it is involved into the smell. That's why it plays a role in smell mediated sexual behavior. Okay, so as you can see here, there are some fibers coming here from the olfactory bulb. Okay, now let's talk about the connection of these fibers. Okay, let's come over here. Okay, so this is basically the same diagram, only that we have just spotted out the fibers. Okay, so here we have our hippocampus. So from hippocampus to the mammillary body, the fibers, they are called the phonics. Okay, so phonics connect the hippocampus to the mammillary body as well as to the septa area. And then from the mammillary body to the anterior nucleus of thalamus via mammillothalamic tract. Okay, and then from the anterior nucleus of thalamus to the cingulate gyrus via thalamo-cingulate tract, and then from the cingulate gyrus back to the entorhinal cortex via cingulum, and then finally from entorhinal cortex back to the hippocampus. So what you notice is that we started with the hippocampus and we ended with hippocampus. So this is what is called Papez circuit. Okay, so this is what is called Papez circuit. So the Papez circuit, it is basically involved into the episodic memory. So episodic memory, it is a long-term memory. Okay, so let me repeat on the Papez circuit. So let's start. So hippocampus to the mammillary body via phonics, from the mammillary body to the anterior nucleus of thalamus via mammillothalamic tract, and from the anterior nucleus of thalamus to the cingulate gyrus via thalamo-cingulate tract, and from the cingulate gyrus back to the entorhinal cortex via cingulum, and from the entorhinal cortex finally back to the hippocampus, which is now the part which is responsible for recent memory. So if there is damage to this part, which is the entorhinal cortex, which is the hippocampus, you lose recent memory. So this is the part which can lead to amnesia. So amnesia is a situation whereby there is damage, or rather there is lesion to hippocampus, because remember we said hippocampus plays a role in recent memory. Of course, we have the Papez circuit which plays a role in episodic memory. So Papez circuit, we have described it. We start with hippocampus and we end with hippocampus. But if there is damage to hippocampus alone, you lose the sense of recent memory. So in road accident, it is common that the patient won't be able to describe what had happened because they have lost the recent memory. So there is lesion to hippocampus. Okay, but they are able to remember some other things which happened long ago because the memory is still there within the cortex because of this Papez circuit. Okay, which is involved into the Papez, which is involved into the episodic memory. But the recent memory, it has been disturbed because they have disturbed the hippocampus. Okay, so another connection which we are going to see is that there is this part, stria terminalis, which connect the amygdala to the septal region as well as to the hypothalamus. Okay, so this part, stria terminali, as well as the ventral amygdala fugal pathway, they pretty much do the same job. Okay, they connect the amygdala to the septa as well as to the hypothalamus. Okay, and then the stria medullaris thalamic, it connects the septal region to the it connected to the habenula somewhere here. Okay, and then the medial forebrain bundle connect the prefrontal lobe to the hypothalamus. Okay, and then we can have also anterior commissure, which also connect the two cerebral hemisphere, to be specific, the temporal lobe, right? Yes. Okay, so this is the part which plays a role. Okay, so if there is damage to amygdala, remember we said this part, it is involved into sexual mediated smell. So if there is damage to this part, okay, so damage to this part, we end up having the Clover-Bucy syndrome. So Clover-Bucy syndrome is a syndrome whereby you have the damage to the amygdala. Okay, so in this video we have summarized everything which we need to know about the amygdala. So with respect to our objective, so we have talked about anatomic position, we have talked about the function, we have talked about the components, we have talked about the connection of the limbic system, and we have talked about the clinical correlation. Okay, so stay tuned until next time.